Good evening. My name is Helen Anthony. I'm the chair of the Committee on Finance. I'm calling to order our regular meeting on Tuesday, February 11th at 2025 at 5:35 p.m. Madam Clerk, would you please call the roll?
Chairwoman Anthony.
Present.
Vice Chairman Taylor is absent. Councilor Antoine.
President.
Councilwoman Graves is absent. Councilor Sanchez.
Present.
We have 3 present and 2 absent. We have a quorum.
Thank you so much. I wanted to thank Ken Chavarini from the City Solicitor's Office for joining us. And thank you so much to Councilor Vargas for joining us today. And also, as usual, as always, we're grateful for Chris and Donna who are our clerks. So thank you very much. With that, I would ask for a motion to take agenda item number 3 out of order. We have the motion.
So moved.
Second. Motion made by Councilor Sanchez, seconded by Councilor Ingebaugh. All in favor? Aye. All opposed. Madam Clerk, would you please read item number 3?
Resolution authorizing approval of the agreement by and among the town of Foster and the Providence Water Supply Board, an enterprise fund of the city of Providence and the city of Providence relative to the tax agreement for the town of Foster.
Wonderful. Thank you for coming back. We'll swear you in.
Please raise your right hands. You swear on the evidence of perjury that testimony you're about to give is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth.
I do.
And please state your names for the record.
Jason, Providence Water.
Thank you so much for joining us again. And I'm sorry that we continued this matter, as my colleagues. We just had some questions on the presentation on this matter. Evaluation of the properties, the Foster properties. We just wanted to know basically whether you have the data that would, I think, show us that it is a good deal for the city. That in other words, that we would be paying less under this tax agreement than we would if they were normally taxed.
Yes. So thanks for having us back tonight. I appreciate that. Appreciate the chance to provide you with some additional information. So we sent over just a brief analysis of the properties and where it's going, but just to walk through it quickly. Based on the so with the current proposed agreement, the rate starting for 25 taxes was $4,402,000. And then if we looked at for FY24, the commercial rates, based on the 2023 valuation of the 26 properties, that tax rate would be $462,798. So it's a difference of $60,000. The valuation of properties based on the 2023 valuation is $22.2 million. Our current agreement, our existing agreement today, we have the 8,400 an acre that we pay. So our valuation based on our current agreement is only 18.6. So we're already starting with a $3.6 million reduction in valuation based on that. What this agreement that we're proposing is doing is starting at that starting point of the 18.6 million valuation, which is where we take that and we come up 4% for next year. And that is where we're only getting to 402. So the benefits to for this agreement are year one, it's a $60,000 reduction in what we would have paid. Going forward, this is a 10-year agreement. So any new properties that we acquire, we won't be taxed on. That's going to stay stagnant. And then any new improvements, those won't be taxed on. So that's going to stay stagnant. It can only go up to 4% unless they go to the legislature to get it higher, right? So that's the max, right? It could be less than that if in future years they go to 3% and so forth. And going down, it goes down. So just looking at that, so if today we were going to pay for FY24 $162,000, right? And for 25 we would pay 402. for 27, 419,000, for 28, 435. So we get almost all the way to, tax year 2030 before we even get to that 462, which doesn't take into account if properties may have been assessed. Again, we are not affected by that. Ours is flat. So it's a very good deal for us.
Wonderful, and that's exactly what we were looking for. Committee members, any questions? No. Yes, please.
Just out of curiosity, so this is the list of all the properties that are
Yes.
under your guys' ownership. How many of these have you purchased in the last 10 years?
So in the past 10 years, so in the previous tax agreement, we had the same thing, any property would be tax exempt. There's only one property on there that's tax exempt that will come into this new agreement, so one.
Thank you so much for coming back and providing this information.
And, I am gonna ask that we mark this as exhibit 1. Motion.
Second.
And motion made by Councilor Sanchez, seconded by Councilor Vanderbilt. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye, all opposed. Okay, and with that, so once. My body. Councilor Vargas, do you have a question?
Yes, I do. Thank you for being here. All these properties, they are just land only, or they have buildings in it? Land only, they produce water,
They produce water, they're in a watershed.
so we need to protect them
Correct.
to not to get the water,
Protect the water. Yes.
protect the water
Yes.
lake.
Yep.
for us. So that's why we're buying all these properties around, like,
Correct.
And,
If they meet certain criteria, we'll buy it. We prefer to get a development right, but if they want to sell it outright, we'll purchase it.
thank you.
Okay, all right. Would anyone like to make a motion?
Motion to approve item number 3.
Second. Motion to approve made by Councilor Sanchez, seconded by Councilor Vanderbilt. All in favor? Aye. All opposed? Thank you so much for doing that. We appreciate it.
Thank you.
Okay, the next I'm going to ask for another motion to take an item out of order. That's what I asked. That we take item number 4 out of order.
Second.
All right, motion made by Councilor Vanderbilt, seconded by Councilor Sanchez. All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? All right, Madam Clerk, would you please read agenda item number 4?
Resolution authorizing approval of the following change order number 4, contract award by the Board of Contract and Supply in accordance with section 21-26B4 of the Code of Ordinances. Omen, formerly Associates, $382,087.25, planning and development.
Wonderful. Who do we have here this evening to present?
Raise your right hands. You swear on the penalty of perjury that the testimony you're about to give is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing. And please state your names for the record.
Joe Mulligan, Director of Planning.
Jess Lance, Director of Special Projects for Planning and Development.
Thank you so much for joining us. Director Mulligan and Jess, we appreciate you coming. So if you would mind just giving us an overview of what this is.
Okay, so this is what should be the final contract amendment with Bowman, who is our contract administrator for the Woonasquatucket River Greenway construction project that is ongoing. Many of you are aware that that entire project has hit a bunch of snags and was delayed for a long time. We're in construction, as the construction crew is getting out and actually digging up earth despite test pits that had been done in the past, trying to assess conditions under the ground. As construction was happening and earth was being moved, we discovered a lot of conflicts with existing Rhode Island energy utilities and the green infrastructure that the project is implementing. So we've had to have our design do quite a bit of amendment to the existing plan that we originally had for the construction crew. That's been the basis of our delay in this project. We've also been out in the field full time and, sort of on the ground, being very nimble and addressing abutter concerns. We've had a bunch of changes in the uses to a bunch of the buildings in the corridor, different trucks coming in, which has required a bunch of different kinds of like truck tuning movements and requiring changes to the design sort of on the fly while the construction crew is out there. So given a bunch of those delays, we've also had, we had a Prov water main that was not marked on any of the plans, and even after, everybody went through dig safe and did everything that they were supposed to do, construction crews hit a main and caused, some issues with a water main down there. So it's been kind of everything you can imagine in a construction project in an old city with not the best records, to make sure that everything's going forward smoothly. So with that, we are here today to ask for a contract to extend the time that Bowman is out in the field with their subs as our construction administrators, making sure that the construction crew is doing everything according to plan, making changes when needed, that kind of thing. So we were originally supposed to be done at the end of the 2024 construction season. We are now pushing that out to September of 2025, given winter shutdown.
Okay, so just so, we're here. Well, the change orders, you're right, have been significant when I look at the original contract amount, and certainly I understand that why that is now. But change order number 4, the one for 382.87.25. So it's broken out, the scope of services is broken out on the documentation that we brought to us, some of the blame. The Bowman, Horsley, Witten, and Right Turn Solutions. Can you just talk to me about what each of those will be doing?
So Right Turn Solutions is our team that is on the ground out in the field with the construction crew. Whatever the construction day is, 7 a.m. to 3 p.m. They're out on there full time. Given all of the complications that we've had with this construction project, we've determined that it makes the most sense to have somebody out there full time. Whenever a construction crew is out there, we have an administrator making sure that everything's going. So Right Turn Solutions, we've got our project administrator, Rob Herrera, who's been great out there fixing all kinds of issues for us. Horsley Witten is the lead landscape architect on the project. They have been responsible for a lot of the changes that have been made to the green infrastructure, given the utility conflicts that we've. And Bowman is the lead engineer. They're the ones that are in charge of all of the other civil engineering and design changes that have to happen.
Okay, thank you. Questions? Yes, Councilor Annabelle.
Thank you, Chairman. And thank you, Jess. It seems like you're doing a really excellent job on a really complicated project. So thank you for leading this through. The only question I have is where is the additional 380 something? Where's the additional funding coming from?
So this is entirely CIP funded.
Okay.
Even the additional amount,
Correct.
okay. All right, any other questions? All right.
Yeah, I guess I, was not all the CIP money. Okay.
This is not, I don't think for these two, maybe, yeah, Courtney, when we can. Courtney, is it? Chief, is it possible to ask this question of you?
Yes, but this is on your line. So we can just clarify this.
So this project has been funded by the CIP line item 4.01, the Winnebago River Improvements, as well as some of the 2.49, which is the OPM, and then there's a little bit more in, I don't remember.
So it's not, so it's not going above what you've allocated, it's just you're doing a change order to like extend the contract.
Correct.
But it's not more than, okay, so nothing else has to shift and the other projects aren't kicked out. Okay, that's the question.
Yes, this money has been allocated for this project specifically.
Is that what you wanted to know? Okay, make sure that money's not being taken from some other project. Okay. All right. Yes, Councilor Vargas.
Thank you. So according to my knowledge, this project is the same one that I approved on 2022, right? And they got delayed because they always came back changing orders.
So we had a bunch of different review agencies that came back and kept changing the design on us. Yeah,
It's something that we can do to avoid these changing orders every time, because every time they change an order, they're looking for something else, or more money, or more this, or more that. I understand if they want to change the orders to give them more time, definitely, I'm very happy to do that, because of the weather, because of the winter, because of something else, but like, to break a water main pipe, and nobody noticed that there was a huge pipe underneath, that's something weird that we had to go after whatever who did to do the mark where the pipes are. You know, good thing that they didn't hit a gas pipe. The whole half of Oneonville will be gone. We have the riverside somewhere else, so, and something that we can do to avoid all these, because I've been in the council for 3 years and they haven't done this project,
it's almost done now, so we're getting there.
yeah.
But I
Your
hear
answer,
you. yeah.
Councilman, I think if you look at it in the perspective that, on most major construction projects, the price you're given is based on the information that you know and is transparent. In many contexts, particularly in a city like Providence, which is an ancient city, in which documentation of past work might have been done more casually than it is done today, or to a different standard, that until you get out of the site and begin to excavate and reveal what might lay below the surface hidden to the eye, we will always, in all projects, maintain a project contingency, which is a certain percentage of the overall design contract value and construction contract value. And although we prefer not to spend it, it is always appropriate to have at least a 10% contingency of work, through which this falls within that guideline, closely, for unforeseen conditions that are endemic on just about every project that you'll do in most circumstances. So even though it's difficult to come back and continue to ask for additional funding, it should be anticipated that there will be a certain percentage of overage, both in the soft costs and the hard costs on any project that we do in most contexts within the city like Providence.
And
or elsewhere.
to your point about what we can do better going forward, I know that the crews at all of the utility agencies have been really working very hard to update the information that they do have available over the past few years. So ever since this project was designed, you know, we did the best we could with the information that we had. Since then, I know a lot of the utility companies have been a lot better about getting better information. So going forward, hopefully issues like this are mitigated.
Yes, Counselor.
Thank you, Marja. So this 382,000 is already covered. You guys are not asking for more money besides this, because we know we are in crisis, right? So every dollar counts. I'm not saying penny, because we're not having more pennies, so every dollar counts. So we have to be careful with these change orders from now on, at least for the next 4 years. Thank you.
I should add for the record that Jess Lance and her team were able to negotiate this fee down from higher level. So it's not given at face value and presented to us. It's reviewed by our consultant team for appropriateness, and then in turn, we question everyone. Every dollar amount that comes to us. It's not accepted blindly as a fait accompli and submitted.
Thank you.
A lot of pushback.
We appreciate that. Yes, Counselor Sanchez.
Thank you. Director Mulligan, what's the difference between this project, like, you know, this, who's the firm that did like the site work? Who would have been responsible to see, like, for example, that water line was right there?
Oh, well, so, I mean, that would have been under the design contract, and part of that is to survey known existing conditions. And not too dissimilar from a problem we've had nearby on another unrelated project, that in some instances, What should have been discovered was not, and that falls into the realm of errors and omissions. And then there are other discoveries that are simply undocumented or unknown, and that falls into project contingency and potential change orders. So just about everything on this project that wasn't initiated by an abutters concern or a latecomer to the project, like another utility who says, oh, I see that the street's open, now is our chance to get in and do improvements or modifications, well, before they do finish the paving. That should fall within the realm of project contingency and potential change orders. So, you know, two different paths, and this one is within what I would consider outside third-party influences that have requested changes or unforeseen conditions or unknowns that were discovered during the construction process.
Like I know what he's talking about, do you guys like, are you following me? So, cause we were like talking at the PRA where there's like another project nearby where there was an error. And that firm is responsible for like the remediation.
And we discern that rationale on all submittals that come to us. Is it an obligation of the owner? Or is it an obligation of the consulting team that should have known or should have discovered this? And that review is always done on any requested change order that comes through on the soft costs and anything that's discovered during the construction period.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Okay,
Second.
motion to approve made by Councilor Ingersoll, seconded by Councilor Santos, all in favor? All opposed? Thank you so much for the time. I really appreciate it. Okay, with that, Madam Clerk, if you please read agenda item number 1.
Discussion relative to payment of school construction contractors. The following have been invited. Courtney Hawkins, Operating Officer, in the Mayor's Office. John Arzumanian, Director, Department of Public Property. Joe DeSanti, Project Manager, Downs Construction.
Ms. Barron is now to approve that they're not familiar about the bid of the truth. Please state your names for the record.
Joe DeSanti, Director of Project Management, Down Construction.
Courtney Hawkins, Chief Operating Officer.
John Rushman, Director of Public Records.
Thank you so much, everyone, for coming. And Mr. DeSanti, you must be getting really tired of us here.
No. It's great to see you, Madam Chair.
Make you your own name, please.
Yeah, couldn't make you your own. The reason we're meeting today is just to make sure, you know, that we have a report, and thank you so much, Chief, for making yourself available. So that we know on our side, once how the payment for the contractors are going with regard to the school construction. There has an allegation and the right that we've been slow to pay our contractors and therefore are delaying certain phases of the construction. And I, you know, think it's something that we really need to understand to be sure, you know, that the administration certainly is doing all they can to make sure that these payments are being made promptly and that we, as a city, are not holding up the construction. Did I represent correctly, Chief?
Probably. I don't want to speak for other government.
All right, well, that's why I would like to hear from you. I will speak for myself then, and hopefully it's some of my fellow counselors, but I appreciate your time.
Thank you. And I thought we would use this time to address that question, but also we've talked about a little bit of table setting, reminding us where we are in all the school construction and like expect to come back to this committee routinely. So we've prepared just like a brief overview for you that I think will be helpful as we move forward. As it relates to payment of vendors, you know, whenever that was in the last year, the city did run into some problems where I now understand the historic practice was not to line up the bonding for school construction with the projects. And so the city ran out of money and we had lots of delays in paying that. This was, you know, many months ago. We have since rectified that. We brought the financial management of school construction into finance. So Sarah, Crystal, and Larry are overseeing that. Sarah and Larry are here to also answer questions. We meet weekly to review all outstanding invoices, so I can tell you now that everything that we have that's been approved has been paid. Sarah set up a new process for the way we pay bills using bond money that is much more efficient. And we, as of, I don't know, a week and a half ago, we had brought all of our vendors in with all of the city agencies that have a hand to play in school construction, because we're all gonna be working together on these projects. And we asked vendors in the room, like, if they were having problems with payments, and everyone like gave us very good feedback. So that is not an issue anymore, and we will, I feel like really confident in the systems the team has set up to make sure people get paid. That said, you'd be shocked to know, it's sometimes hard to get vendors to send bills. And so there's like, there's all this work that has to happen before the bills get to the city. That I certainly wasn't aware was an issue, but Joe and his team are working with everybody to make sure that we get things submitted timely. Once we have them, it's not an issue to get them.
And I'll just stop you there and ask a
Sure.
quick question, and if you don't mind, counselors, you also can ask, I think, but if it's okay with you. Do we have anything written in our contracts where they have to submit payments on a regular basis, or?
We do, they're supposed to be submitted prior to the 25th of the month. And they go through a draft process, so that by the 30th, the final payment application. And as Bertie stated, there's many vendors that struggle to make that deadline and to do it correctly. The few that do, you get those processed very quickly, but sometimes it does take time for a couple of vendors to run through the system. We've actually sat down and kind of workshop with a couple of vendors to help them through that process. And I'm happy to report that probably 95% of them are now much better. And there's one or two that still struggle internally with doing it, and we continue to help them.
And it's just a lot of work, like, we're gonna have these problems, like, it's a lot of subcontractors, we're doing, potentially $700 million in construction in 5 years, like, everyone is really pressed to the max, and I think some people would like to just like act like that's not an issue, but we're like asking people to do a lot of work, and so I think Joe's support of the teams has been really helpful, but there's a lot of technical assistance that's required to help the smaller subcontractors being able to bill in a way that's appropriate, and, we have to work through those cases. But at least now we have a line of sight, like, I personally review a payment report every week to know what's outstanding. Those systems weren't in place before, and so bringing that into finance has been a really helpful process.
And then before we go on, one more thing. So you said before that, did we, because we weren't as organized as we are currently, have we actually lost money?
We missed the opportunity, we, the city,
Yes.
missed the opportunity to draw down a $60 million bond. That I think the process for that would have had to start before this administration was here. We have a plan to recoup that, so it will be fine, but that was part of the challenge.
And that was before, that's the prior administration.
I mean, it would have had to start, it was.
Great. Yes,
Question?
counselor.
Thank you guys so much for coming and giving that data. For, when there were delays a couple months ago, like, how long were people waiting for payments? Was it significant delays? or, Like months or like, okay. Were they compensated for having to wait extra? Because I know some of the smaller vendors can't absorb months long waits, or is there? It was just a
City
catch
doesn't
up?
really have a process for that.
Okay.
I think they would have to like file a claim. It's not for me to pay someone outside what their
Yeah,
contract is. I felt, it's our obligation to tighten up those systems.
Yeah.
I feel like we can.
But did anyone file any claims? No. And then, how, like, this might be kind of a vague question, but how did we get to a place where we were where we were paying, where we were able to run out of money? Like, how did that?
Interesting, but, there's this, there's a couple, it's complicated, but the RIDE approves, what you'll see in this presentation are what are called MOAs, which are like the maximum amount you can spend on a building.
Yeah.
And then you bond, but the amount of money that you bond for is not necessarily the amount of money in the MOA.
Yeah.
And in fact, cities often bond for more because then it gives them the opportunity to invest more over time if they need it. So if teams aren't lining up all of your cash flow over time, it's like very easy to lose track of the money that's coming in and how it's aligned to contracts. There has also been a past practice of doing like big multi-year contracts on new projects.
Yeah.
Which I think is hard to manage, so what we've worked on is doing year-to-year POs. So that you won't see, we're not bonding for 3 years of a PO at the same, we're not doing a PO for 3 years at the same time, we're only doing it for this current fiscal year. So that when we go back to do the new PO, we're sure that we're reconciling the amount. But the way it's financed is like it's like a Rubik's Cube, it's very complicated, and
Yeah.
people aren't paying close attention to it. And previously, the management of the finances related to bonding had been put in public property. It's not to say that public property is a fantastic department, but it is the most complicated financial thing I've ever seen.
Yeah.
And so you want a collaboration between public property and finance so that you're benefiting from the structures. It was all previously managed outside of Lawson, the city's financial system. So Crystal and Sarah and Larry couldn't routinely report on it through Lawson like we do everything else.
Yeah.
We've changed that, so everything is managed through accounting now. So it was just like, I think it's fine if you're doing like $15 million of school construction
Yeah.
work.
700.
But when you shift to this model of working at this kind of scale, if you don't have the right systems in place, you're gonna get tripped.
Can I ask one last question?
Yes, please.
Because I know your whole presentation, so it's like pre-ask all my questions, but it sounded like you think we might be able to recoup some of that 60 million that we didn't draw down on. Is that something you could report on in the future when there's a plan?
I'll show you here with that. It's not that we lost money, it's just that we had authorization to borrow money and that authorization expired. So we can still borrow that money, just we have to do it in a.
Yes, Council.
Just a clear question on here. So, subcontractors bill us directly,
No, they rely on their
contract. So do we interact with the subcontractor? Like just, do we pay them directly? Or-
We do. We interact with the subcontractors, we review all of the billings, so, any project, there could be 20 other subcontractors to the construction managers. And we review all of those as well, and that backup needs to be there as well. So, and just answer a couple things, so the delay in payment did not delay any of the projects. We were very fortunate, one of the things we do is when we do select contractors. We know sometimes that payment might be an issue, and that we want to select contractors that can carry the project, right? So they have credit lines, we kept in contact with the contractors throughout the whole time. We were very transparent, we didn't say to put checks in the mail or anything like that, we made sure that they understood so they could plan properly as well. Which helped them out. We also had many of those contractors that were more than willing to say, we're gonna get our billing in order in-house, so we're gonna wait anyways and submit the bill. So we were fortunate in being very selective in our contractors up front, where we had some contractors that worked with us. And in some cases where subcontractors were owed money, they reached into their pocket and paid them in advance while they were waiting to get paid, which is the kind of contractors we want to continue to work with as well.
Yes, Council.
Just to have like an idea of like what we're working with, like. There's probably like dozens of subcontractors, but like how many contractors are we currently working on school construction right now?
So for,
lead contractors.
Yeah. Like, how many like
Let's flip
contractors?
to
do we have?
the first page here, which gives you an overview of phase 1, which are completed projects. So phase 2 and phase 3. Phase 2 are projects that are like digging in the ground right now, and phase 3 are projects that are in development. And so how many contractors, CMs, do we have across phase 2 and 3?
7, one for each one, well, design build contractor.
They're all different.
They're all, sometimes they have 2 jobs, but they're all different teams on each project.
The same companies or different companies? Sorry.
No,
They,
that's all right.
they could be similar companies, right? So for example, ONG is doing the work at Frank Spaziano Middle School, and they're also happen to be the construction manager at RFK. They're just getting started.
So you're gonna hear us like forever now talk about these 4 phases, so just to, you know, like. I still get this wrong, so I should keep repeating it so you guys can feel like you have all the information you have. So phase 2, like Spaziano, they're warming the ground to dig the foundation this week. Kazarian, I almost went over with a sledgehammer today because we got a demo permit issued. And then Fogarty is close to that point. So we're gonna start seeing active construction in all 3 of those. They have, you know, nearly approved designs by RIDE. Joe and his team are working with DIS and planning to get all of those worked out. And kids will be in those buildings September 2026. And so in the letter that I know you received from RIDE, there was concerns about delays on this project. We have also done a truing up of actual construction timelines against what had been previously projected. So it is true that when you looked at projected timelines that were created 6 months ago, they were different than what they are now. Joe and his team have worked to drill down to timelines with the vendors that we're all going to be accountable to, and that's what we're managing the projects to now. But no money's been lost. You know, we have to get these projects done though for September 2026.
Or there will be money that's lost?
It's probably not money lost, but reimbursement, like we'll have to wait long for reimbursement. But the bigger issue is like kids need to be in these buildings for September 2026, or we have other problems with other construction projects. So that is the reason the timing is the most critical.
Can we just get more clarification, as to why these timelines aren't, the original timelines aren't
Yeah.
getting met?
Yeah, so there's a couple of reasons depending on the project. So one of them for Spaziano, for example, there's a change order in front of you as well. That project was originally scheduled to go in the existing Spaziano school. As we did more programming and visioning with PTSD, it was determined operationally, it would be a lot better if staff moved across the street from the new Spaziano elementary school. So there was time, I don't want to say lost, but there was time spent investigating and determining that it would be better for the city and PPSD from an operational standpoint to have that school directly across, which certainly makes a lot more sense. So that took some time and months to do that and realign. The benefit out of it is we ended up having Laurel Hill now that we use as a swing space, so we actually gained a swing space and we're gonna be able to start construction. We are starting construction there. Same thing on Fogarty and Kazarian. We went through the process over this past fall to align all of our pre-K-8 projects moving forward. We have quite a few going on. So we should have a standard of what that looks like for every pre-K moving forward. So we spent some time and due diligence working with BPSD and RIDE to make sure that they were both aligned on what the vision should be on those projects. Because we don't want to build a Fogarty that looks different than a Kazarian, than a Lima, than a Messer, right? They're all supposed to be pre-K-8. We want them all to have the same equity and the same programming. You know, they'll certainly all be a little bit different just because of the sites. But those kind of things are what happened over a period of time.
I think in general, the work to design the schools and align with PPSD about what they want in the new buildings hadn't been done and took much longer. So, you know, those original timelines predate all of us. But we worked to get to something that the endpoint was always September 2026. So as long as we deliver on that date, we are fine. Okay. All right, and then phase 3, the thing I'll flag for you is Messer, Lima, and Mount Pleasant were always phase 3. We've recently, at the request of the district, moved RFK to phase 3. phase 4, so it'll be delivered earlier. RFK is gonna swing into Hopkins this fall. And the team has been working to accelerate design work on that school. That's gonna be hard, because this was a recently made decision, but we're all gonna work really hard to make it happen, because it, gives us more time for all of the rest of it. Okay, the next, page summarizes the, different sources of bonding. So the 135 is the most recent funding that was authorized. It was an existing bond that the city council authorized us to borrow against, so we're spending that. We also have 2 pots of PAYGO, which are 100% funding from RIDE for projects from 2022 and 2023. We have a previously passed GEO bond sitting there waiting to be drawn down of 140 million. We have the most recent bond ballot initiative for 400 million that was passed. And then to answer your question, Councilor Anderbois, at the end, if we need the $60 million, we would use the PPBA, which has the ability to draw up the bond, and we have the capacity to do that, to borrow it. So this is all the bonding that we'll do. And what the finance team is doing is watching and laying out when we have to start the process, because it takes several months. So the next thing you'll see from us is a request to borrow on the 140 million. That's the next big tranche of funds, and we're gonna wait for as long as we can to do that, and then we'll pull in that money. The state reimbursement is 80 to 91%, depending on when the project was approved and how much bonus money was available. And as a reminder, well, maybe not as a reminder, but a conversation that we're going to need to have is that when we originally came forward, when RIDE came forward with a request to borrow the 400 million,
Yes.
there was a indication that the city share of that money would be covered through energy savings. As we've worked to try to execute an MOU on that, it is clear that that is not likely. And so the city will be responsible for the share of that money. We believe that we can cover that in our debt service, but it means we won't be able to borrow for other things. And so at some point, this committee will need to consider what that means for the finances.
We have the specifics on why that is not able to be done.
Well, because I mean, one thing there's a few reasons. One is as we shift buildings to more electric and more cooling, the idea that they're using less electricity is a misnomer, right? So we're actually seeing electric bills in buildings go up because they have air conditioning for the first time and because they're using electric over other energy sources. And so when I sought to execute the MOU and said, you know, is the city going to be guaranteed this local match regardless of if the energy savings are achieved? I was told no. And we would only get it if the energy savings were achieved, and we don't believe that we would likely see a reduction in energy costs.
Councilor Anderbaugh.
I feel like that was a big switch by RIDE, because they said, no, that's not, anyway, that's just, I'm saying that on the record. But the second is, has RIDE connected with David Ruggiero, the city's energy administrator? Because there was conversation when they came here about how the city has the, sorry, my brain is so tired of it, but like the net metering credits and other things like that. And it seemed like there was a fundamental misunderstanding by RIDE about how energy systems worked and like how they were paying your bills and not taking advantage of the work that David does. So I just want to say again on the record for RIDE that like if they haven't had that conversation with David to help like manage their bills, that would be a really effective thing for them to do.
Now that we're like on the other side of the settlement, PPSD and the city are working on that very issue very closely.
Okay, thank you.
There's a lot of openness in the district to have David help, and I think he's going to deliver a lot of value.
still what you're saying though, however, that will be done.
Yeah.
That will be done, that will be facilitated, but there isn't going to be a savings.
I don't think there's gonna be 8%.
Can they quantify what amount of savings David does help them get, and that counts towards our credit, like that, maybe that's a conversation for a future time, but it just seems.
It's just like well, if you just, if even for, like, I don't claim to know very much about this topic, but if you imagine all of the new buildings have air conditioning
Oh, yeah,
and are gonna be used 12 months a year because they have air conditioning.
yeah.
Like, the
It's all
electric bill
good.
is gonna go up for good reason, and it's all good, but like, you know, maybe in a future state where we have solar and battery back, like,
Yeah,
but
yeah,
that's not what's gonna be delivered in these projects.
Counselor Sanchez,
Hey, Coleman, I don't wanna get too ahead of myself, but do we know like what is available right now and not like the total for funding sources? Like how much have we got,
Cash we have right
like how
now?
much have we gone through of like the existing bond already?
Only the first bond has been.
Completely spent?
Not even completely spent.
Oh, so
We're
we
in
haven't
the
even
process
touched, we haven't even
of spending
touched the other
it. Correct.
four funds?
We're starting to spend the first bond and the first two paygo lines, you know, now. And so the next time we come back on this topic, we can bring, you know, year-to-date expenditures against those funding sources.
So just to circle back with what we were talking about cash flow, so we didn't have access to any of these bonds?
You have to go
Couple-
through this like long process to actually like go out to the bond market to sell the bonds, which like starts with council authorization, and it's like, Larry can tell you, give you a long lesson on it, but like it takes 3 or 4 months to get access to bond money. And you don't want to get it, bring it in too early. So because then you have to start paying debt service. And so you like, let it sit there until you are, you know, 6 months from needing it, and then you go out and you draw down the funds.
I'd like to recognize that we have been joined by Council President Miller and also by Majority Leader Espinal. Thank you so much for coming. And maybe we'll take a rain check on the tutorial from Larry on the bond.
Whole session.
Yeah, we'll do a whole session on that. Okay,
All right, so the next page, I just gave you a summary of the approved MOAs, so what we expect to spend on those projects that I just talked about in phase 2 and 3.
may I just interrupt on this? Have these changed? I mean, are these the original?
These are the original.
Okay, these are the original MOAs. Nobody's been changed.
Well, let me correct that. So it has changed. Kazarian and Fogarty changed. Originally, it was, if you go back in time, it was St. Joe, there was 75 million earmarked in an MOA for St. Joe's and Spaziano. That project was determined was not needed by PBS any longer, and Kazarian had, I think, like 20 or $30 million in. So the determination at that time was to two new pre-Ks instead, and it was, the money was split between Kazarian and Fogarty. So to be completely truthful, if you follow the logic and go back, I just thought about it. There was the original MOA that was changed.
But since we've been here projecting.
Yeah, no, and none of that money was ever used at St. Joe, right? So all that money is
Okay,
100% still there.
Okay,
all right. Okay, and then that brings us to phase 4, which is the most fun. So this is the thing that we kind of worked very quickly on last year because we needed to get approved MOAs by June. To be eligible for bonus, so we worked with PPSD to understand how they wanted to spread this money, and these were the final approved MOA amounts from RAC. So outside of RFK, which after this, I'm gonna start calling phase 3, because it's in the phase with those others, and it's helpful for me to think of it in terms of timeline. Everything else here, the scope is really to be determined. And so we are starting to work with PPSD to understand if you're gonna, invest $25 million at Hope, for example. how do we prioritize what gets done in that building? And, you know, work with the teams to, you know, finalize scopes that people feel are appropriate. So that hasn't been done yet. And one of the things that we're trying to balance is that, you know, frankly, if we end up in a trade war, the cost to build some of these other things may go up and the opportunity to make other investments may go down. And so we want to be sure we move quickly on some of these where we can, but we also want to make sure we can finish the things we've started with the funding that we have available, because there won't be more school bonding money.
My question on this is, you know, I think, Wright has been very clear that they plan by 2030, they'll provide 100% of Providence students with access to new or like new schools. We have schools that aren't even on the list, phase 1, 2, 3, or 4.
Correct.
So I'm just wondering how that's going to happen. Okay. It's just a statement. I don't expect you have an answer unless we do.
No, I mean, I will say that, because we're partners in this, the commissioner had a press conference yesterday, one of the conditions
Yeah.
for schools to be returned is a commitment for all buildings to become new and like new. Now, there was no mention of a timeline, so that may be where things have changed. But I also have questions, you know, $10 million for Central High School is not gonna make it like new, it'll make a lot. And I do, you know, I think the mayor is committed to getting the buildings to that state, but I think it's certainly gonna take longer than 2030.
One of the comments on the question, the comment is, I asked Ryan that same question at some point, and their response at the time, and I can't speak for them, but I'm pretty sure it's on Zoom somewhere, was that they weren't promising to fix 100% of the schools, but that 100% of the number of students that exist would be able to be in the new electric school. So if there's 18,000 students, I'm making that up, but that's roughly similar, then there's 18,000 seats at schools that are new electric. It means they could skip a school or two, which we don't have information on, but that was like, it was based on the number of students, not just all the schools. And then my question is, do we know, or, because understanding that the world is what it is, and maybe there's gonna be trade war, maybe there's gonna be trade tariffs, some of this might fall off. Which of these, like, what would it take to even just make some of these warm, safe and dry? Like, not even like new, which is what the kids deserve, or new or like new, but like, how many of these have like structural deficiencies that like would bump them up in the case of like declining ability to do things?
That's what we're gonna be prioritizing. Building envelope, HVAC, like roof, and then what's left.
I'm good. Yeah, Counselor Sanchez.
Yeah, no, it's not really a question, it's just a comment. That's why I voted against the $400 million bond. I have one school in my ward and it's not even on this list. And, you know, I think like, Councilwoman Andrews' explanation of like having access to a new or like new school is what needs to be, clarified. Especially as we talk to our community members, because yeah, I think, at least kids in my neighborhood, aren't gonna have, new elementary grade 6. And then just, I guess I do have a question. So the additional potential projects, so all of these are completely out of like what has been done already?
The funding.
Yeah, so like, so didn't classical, like I see classical for.
Classical was in phase 1, and then there's another allocation in phase 4.
Yeah, but this is in addition to the work that's been done already in those two.
Correct. And some of this, like the math doesn't add up to the bonds because some of this also provides for using the revolving fund to pay for some of this. Just that separate, $8 million that we revolve through. So one of our tasks is to line up the revolving fund project with these projects to make sure we're using those dollars and figure out how to bring more money into the revolving fund.
And this is a revolving fund that right pass.
We have it.
the revolving fund we have?
Uh-huh.
Okay,
So we use it for school capital projects.
okay. Yes,
So I guess kind of building up on my first comment, so if by like phase four, like, you know, like how many seats is that, like, that kids like having new or like, you know, like citywide? Like, once we finish phase four in 5 years, like how many seats, what's the number of seats that is?
I have that document, but I don't have it with me. I do have a sheet that shows the student population.
That would be a question for the district.
Like, it's pretty close to like the 18,000, right? Like,
The thing that is like awkward about where we are in the governance is like, technically, the city isn't part of the process for laying out the future state. We're just responsible for executing on the construction of the future state that's laid out, and so. Like some of these include changes to models. We can provide you PTSD slide on it, but the shift to K-8 and the number of tracks per school and how they're programming, that's all decided within the district.
so like, what I wanna just like get to the point, like, as a city councilor is like. I think we need to like start like a meeting and like have a conversation with ourselves, like, if we all keep supporting the path that we're going, like, there is. Multiple schools that are gonna be slated to close. In the next decade. Right, like, is it
There
safe
are
to
multiple
say? Is
buildings
it-
that do not have money in plan for this.
And our enrollment is like going down, and by the time we're done with phase four, like, it's gonna be more than what we actually have of kids in the city right now. Public school district.
I mean, you can attract them back with nice new buildings.
I mean, that would be the goal, right?
Yeah,
And
it's part of the goal.
I guess this would be the right question.
it's not really a question, it's just like
Yeah.
something we all need to acknowledge and be honest with
Yeah.
ourselves.
Absolutely. Thank you for
It's
speaking.
so good. Yeah.
And then may I go back to the $8 million revolving, that we would get it for the revolving fund? That's that's a city school construction revolving fund?
Correct.
I didn't know we had that. Can you explain that?
It was set up in the previous administration, and it's a good idea, because how, like, if the district just fixes something. And isn't able to submit it for housing aid, there's no reimbursement on it, and so the idea of the revolving fund was that the city would pay for capital improvements in the district, and then we submit it for housing aid reimbursement, and then it comes back at whatever the percentage is. And so we use that money for, like, right now, it's primarily for emergencies, you know, there was like a water main break, things like that, that used to come out of the district budget. And instead of that, we can pay for it out of this fund and then submit it for reimbursement, and reimbursement comes back into the fund.
So this lives within the city's budget or within the school budget?
The city manages it as a separate account.
Okay, but it's reported by the school. Is it part of the school budget?
It's not part of our.
Thank you. I'm sorry. Sarah, we almost figured it out here.
You swear under penalty of perjury that the testimony you're about to give is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth.
I do.
And please state your name for the record.
Sarah Severa, my instructor. So it's not in the general fund, so it's not budgeted in that way. It's a side fund of the city, and so I'm not sure what year it happened, but the city put in some bond premium, the school put in a piece of money, total $8 million. It came before the council. Was approved, and what happens is we spend $8 million, we get reimbursed 80 to 91%, so we'll get $7 million back. We spend $7 million, we get $6 million back, and so we keep revolving that. So that initial investment of $8 million ends up being like a $50 million.
Okay. Thank you so much, Sarah. Okay. Questions, comments? Yes, Councilor Vargas?
Thank you very much. The question is going back on you were saying about the electric bill. What happens to the gas bill that we were paying before? If we switch to electric, we're not saving in heating system, or
There will be savings, I just don't think they're equivalent to the increase in electricity.
because if we using just the one unit to produce heat and AC, we should be saving at least a little bit
On the gas,
in the gas.
but these buildings don't have AC now,
It's okay.
so it's all new.
Nah, not all of them. Like William the Great. It's not brand new.
Right,
But they do have.
many of them don't have AC. Many of the buildings on the list don't.
So you're telling me that they're using AC now in winter time?
Not in the winter, but when it starts to get warm.
And who's watching them, how they use the system?
It's a good question. Yes, that is something that we're now having our energy management team help them with, because the buildings are much more complicated to manage. And making sure that people are trained and have the ability to do that is very important.
Hope we don't open another new department just for this, right? Going, can I?
Yes, please.
Thank you. Going to classical high school, they having a grand opening next week. So that's based, more, right? That's based on the first $20 million or on the first $40 million?
The first 40 minutes,
First 40?
Yeah.
So they get an extra 20 for phase 4?
correct.
Okay, what was the other question? Can I?
Yes.
Thank you, ma'am. So going back to the change of contract. So Frank de Preciano Middle School is 85 Laurel Hill, right? That's I'm sorry, that's number 2.
Oh, we're gonna get it there in just
Oh,
a
we're gonna, I'm
second.
sorry, that will be next.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, thank you.
That's okay, no worries.
Yes.
Yes, please.
The quick comment I have is just on the air conditioning piece of like, the school haven't had air conditioning before and they do now, and just because I'm just going to the garden party and talk about climate change constantly, like, the schools need air conditioning.
Yeah.
We had to shut down, like, the schools couldn't open on time last year because they couldn't, it was too hot in the schools, so I know we're like, oh no, this electricity costs, which like sucks and is bad and is not great for finances, and also the schools need to operate and the climate is getting warmer, so I just wanna say, I feel like the conversation about AC is really negative, but that's like a really positive thing to come out of it.
Kids need more time on task, and so
Yeah.
now these buildings can be available. 12 months
Through,
early.
yeah. So just wanted to say that, but that's like a good resilient improvement. That's cool.
I would also offer that since the settlement with PPSD happened, like, the teams are working really well together, like, all the nonsense is behind us, and as it relates to facilities, the district, the city, and RIDE are like getting into a groove of working together in a way that will deliver these buildings for kids that I feel really good about. So when you're on the outside and you're just seeing like people throwing letters at one another, whatever, it doesn't feel that way. That's actually not what's going on. Everybody's working hard, and I think it's gonna be, like, there isn't a district in the state that is building, this many new schools at the same time, and I feel very proud of all of the teams for that. So.
I appreciate that, I really do, and it's good to hear. It still doesn't address, I'm just gonna say, it still does not address the issue of transparency. With the students and the parents of the students in the particular schools, why are their schools still? Why, how is it decided how it's going to improve or close or something like that? So I think we have a long way to go. I think in terms of, transparency on these issues, but I feel like financially, I think we're in a much better place. So thank you everyone for your efforts. Yes, Councilor Sanchez.
So just to confirm, thank you, for the,
Yeah.
So I mean, we won't be receiving any more, it's great to hear that some of these issues are behind us, but, so like the payment stuff, like that's all taken care of, we won't be receiving a letter like this in the next couple months, hopefully not. And we've done everything that we could, in our control to.
We will be imperfect in executing on this because this is a lot. And if someone will work with us when we have mistakes or send letters, I hope that we can just work together as a team so that we don't have to do that. But there will be times where I'm gonna have to sit before you and be accountable for things not going according to plan, because the plan is a lot, and like. There are no new resources in our teams to do all of this, you know, this is just something that we're all taking on, so I don't wanna like promise you that we're gonna be perfect. I hope that we can get over the letter sending part and just work together, but, you know, that might not happen.
Thank you.
We appreciate it. Thank you very much. I don't know if you're the same team, speaking just briefly now about item number 2. On the agenda, I am gonna ask for a motion to waive the reading. Motion for the reading by the second. A motion made by Councilor Linderbaugh, seconded by Councilor Sanchez, all in favor? Aye, all opposed. I had asked this is a change order. The one thing, it's just a discussion, we're not voting on this because it is not before us to vote. But there was a change order for the architect on the Frank Spaziano Middle School. And I just thought it was ironic that we get a letter from RIDE saying that we're responsible for the timeline not being met, and they made a mistake of some sort, so I'd like to talk about what that was.
Yep, so this chamber, Joe Sandy from Dallas, is made up of 2 specific items. I'll go out of order. The first is for $24,000. So to the conversation we've been having, as the city goes more to energy efficiency and trying to meet higher and higher goals with chips and with energy efficiency, we asked that team to look at doing another energy model for an all electric building. So that $24,000 was to prepare another energy model, because we do have to do that for RIDE standards. As well as look at some other energy saving measures, and that's what the 24,000 was, which helped us. So we added some insulation, we made some changes to some glass. It was money that is required in order for us to try to achieve and this higher and better standards for our energy efficient buildings. And with electric buildings, we do need to be have more insulation as well. To add to that conversation that we were having, you know, even if you do see some savings in your utility consumption, electrical rates are going up, right? So you're kind of chasing the rate and you're seeing a little bit of savings, and you're probably at the end of the day, you might see some savings, but nothing significant, because your utility consumption rates are going to continue to go higher and higher as more people continue to go back to electrical consumption. So that's the 24,000. The 129,000 of that change order was for relocating the building from the existing Spaziano site to the site directly across from the Spaziano Elementary School. We had to go through planning because we had to do a land development through the planning department. So we had to develop new site plans, as well as do the borings in that area to ensure that the foundation works. So that's what the costs were for both of those.
Why was it relocated?
As we went through the process with RIDE and with PTSD about how they're going to operate a pre-K, it's really a pre-K-8 in 2 different buildings. You know, they had talked about, you know, walking the kids up during the daytime up the road to the Laurel Hill site, right? So it's up the block and a little ways for the little ones. As we walk through that process with the school district, and as they have matured and learned more and more as they build these schools, and they brought new people in, they determined that the best thing would be to have a school that was directly across, so that they could share front doors, they could share resources. If a child was sick, they could bring it to a nurse's office across the street, as opposed to having to walk them up the street. And it was just determined that that was a better operational position for that.
And how on the relocation, how far did that set back the timeline?
It set it back a few months, because we did have to go through planning again, and we did have to redesign documents.
I'm just asking because
Yeah,
we
no,
received,
it's a legitimate question, and it does have an impact.
and when we're receiving letters stating that it's you know, it's a problem because we are not meeting our timelines, our project timelines, and this is letter from Ryan. And they're, they need to acknowledge the fact that they are part of it. That's all I'm saying. Okay. Yes, Councilor Vargas.
Thank you. They don't want to ask?
Go for it.
Thank you. So there's two different buildings, right?
Correct.
So the first one is a middle school or is elementary school?
The new building that we just completed last year is the elementary school, which has been occupied,
And now we're going to be building a middle school.
right, directly across.
Yes, they just need to cross the street. Which will be the difference in money
Which would be a difference as far
as the cost?
um. You know, you mean as far as construction, the difference between building 2 years ago and now?
No, like according to this,
Oh, you mean from moving it from the other, well, there was some cost savings because there is an existing school there that would have to be demolished. There was some site remediation that has to be done there as well. One of the things that we find, and that's actually a perfect example, is when a lot of the schools we're doing, we're rebuilding them right back on where there's a site already. So it's really hard to determine, to go about change orders. It's hard to understand like what's underneath the building when there's a building there. So sometimes we don't know what we're dealing with until we demolish the building and then go in there and start doing some soil analysis and find out that there's a problem. So in this case, we did the soil borings in advance because there was no building there, it used to be a parking lot. So that team went in there with a better understanding, a better cost estimate. I think cost wise, it was probably very similar. I know we had to do that analysis and I don't recall exactly, but the number was very close between building on one site. The actual size of the lot is almost exactly the same size. There would have been some additional costs, like I said, just to demolish the existing building and do some site remediation there. Besides that, I think the costs were pretty similar.
because according to this information here in this paper, 85 Lauderhill is $153 million.
For the 153,000 for the change.
153,000.
Oh, thousand,
Yeah,
okay, 150,000.
Yeah, so that was for, if you look at it, that was for the environmental, the traffic engineering, there's a complete breakdown on what had to happen. So they had to do stormwater calculation for that site, because it had already been done for the other site. So there is some cost that we had to anticipate. Now, if you looked at what the cost is to do the demolition, it probably was a couple $100,000, so it might be a wash. And we gained the ability to move some projects forward by using that existing school as swing space right now too. So there was a benefit to keeping that building as well.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions, comments?
So the one thing I do want to talk about is that and I do love coming here, I do, and I have to give you and the council and Providence administration a lot of credit. When I came here 6 years ago, this sheet was blank. Now look at all the blue there and about 6,000 kids. And if you have not been into classical, Pleasant View, Hope, and seen the transformation, I mean, I get parents that call me on Pleasant View are like emotional about it.
Yeah.
What it looks like there. It really is. And I applaud you all because although we do a lot of work, we wouldn't be here if it wasn't for all of you. It really is a transformation of those schools for those children that deserve it.
And a great deal of gratitude to you for managing all of this, because this is something. So, thank you very much for coming this evening, we really appreciate it. I don't think we have any more business.
Do you want to enter this?
Our city clerk asked us to have motions to adjourn.
Do you want to enter this into the record, madam? No, we have to enter
Oh,
the.
yes, I do. Yes, may I have,
Exhibit two. So moved.
Second.
Motion made by Councilman Hall, seconded by Councilor Sanchez, all in favor? Aye.
Motion to adjourn this finance.
Motion to adjourn made by Councilor Sanchez, seconded by Councilor Ingersoll, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Like, Councilor Sanchez.
Well, I changed.
Really?